He woke up to the soft sound of the morning sun spilling through the tall windows of his enormous bedroom, but even the golden light could not lift the heavy feeling in his chest. The Tycoon, a man known for his immense wealth and powerful influence, lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, feeling an emptiness that no amount of money could ever fill. Around him, everything whispered success, expensive furniture, designer clothes neatly folded, and the view of a sprawling city below, but none of it could comfort him. The silence of the mansion pressed against him, almost mocking him, reminding him that today was supposed to be a special day, his birthday, yet nobody had reached out. For a moment, he tried to shake off the feeling, telling himself that birthdays were just a date on the calendar, a silly excuse for celebrations, but deep down, he longed for something more than the lavish lifestyle he had built. He remembered times when birthdays were full of laughter, when friends and family would gather around him, singing, laughing, sharing jokes and memories. Now, those faces were gone, replaced by empty halls and echoing walls. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and looked around the room, noticing the small details that highlighted his solitude, the expensive watch on his nightstand, the freshly brewed coffee in the kitchen, the neatly polished shoes waiting for him, all of it perfectly arranged, yet none of it meant anything, none of it could give him a hug, none of it could make him laugh, none of it could remind him that he mattered. He sighed and ran his hand through his hair, feeling the weight of loneliness settle even deeper. He thought about the people who had once been close to him, colleagues, friends, even distant relatives. Most of them were too busy with their own lives, some had faded away completely, and others remembered him only when it benefited them. He realized that as he climbed higher in the world of wealth and power, the number of people who genuinely cared had shrunk, leaving him with a hollow feeling, as if all the money in the world could not buy back the warmth of human connection. For breakfast, he poured himself a cup of coffee and sat at the large dining table alone. His gaze wandered around the empty room, noticing the perfectly set chairs that would normally be filled with guests, smiling faces, and chatter. Today, there was nothing but the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant city noises outside. The Tycoon's mind wandered to memories of birthdays long ago, when he had celebrated in simpler homes, with people who didn't care about his money or status, but cared about him as a person. Those were the days when laughter felt genuine, when surprises brought real joy, and when every hug was full of love. He rubbed his face with both hands, trying to hide the sting of loneliness, yet he could not escape it. It followed him like a shadow, clinging to his every thought. Even the luxurious items he owned seemed to mock him, reminding him that happiness could not be bought. He walked over to the window and looked down at the city below, a city full of people rushing to work, meeting deadlines, chasing dreams, and celebrating small joys. He wondered if anyone would even notice that today was his birthday. He doubted it, and the thought made his chest tighten with sorrow. As the hours passed, he tried to distract himself with work, reviewing reports, answering emails, making phone calls, but nothing could fill the void. Every message he received was either formal or impersonal. Nobody reached out with a simple, happy birthday, from the heart. The Tycoon realized that he had built walls around himself over the years, walls of pride, walls of ambition, walls of wealth. And now those walls kept not only the world out, but also the warmth of friendship and love. He sat back in his chair, staring blankly at the papers in front of him, wondering if this was what success truly meant. The house was filled with beauty, luxury, and perfection, yet it felt cold and lifeless. He felt like a prisoner in his own mansion, trapped by his achievements and the loneliness they brought. A single tear escaped his eye, sliding slowly down his cheek, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel completely vulnerable. And in that quiet, lonely moment, he made a silent wish, not for money, not for power, not for more possessions, but for something simple, something human, something real. He wished for someone to care, someone to remember him, someone to bring a spark of joy into his empty life. Little did he know that this wish was about to be answered in a way he never imagined, a surprise that would change his lonely birthday into a day he would never forget. As he sat in his grand mansion, the Tycoon's thoughts drifted back through time, carrying him to a world that felt miles away from his current life. He remembered the birthdays of his childhood, when the house was not filled with gold and marble but with warmth, laughter, and love. Back then, even the simplest things felt magical: a homemade cake with uneven frosting, hand-drawn cards from friends, and the excitement of blowing out candles surrounded by smiling faces. Those were the moments he cherished most. He could almost hear the giggles of his younger self running through the garden, chasing his siblings, and playing games without a care in the world. Each year felt like an adventure, every birthday a celebration, not because of presents or extravagance, but because people genuinely cared about him. Those memories were painted with colors richer than any jewel he now owned. Every hug, every happy birthday, from his parents, every laugh shared with his friends lingered in his mind like a warm glow. The Tycoon also remembered the early days of his career, when he had nothing but dreams and determination. He and his colleagues would celebrate birthdays in modest ways, sometimes sharing a small cake in the office, sometimes going out to a simple restaurant, yet, the joy was real, unpretentious, and heartfelt. He thought about those people, some still in his life, most long gone, and how much their presence had meant to him. Their happiness in celebrating his small victories made him feel seen, valued, and alive. As the memories unfolded, a pang of regret tugged at his heart. He realized that over the years, as his wealth and power grew, he had unknowingly pushed the people who truly cared away. He had surrounded himself with advisors, employees, and acquaintances who were interested in his status, his money, or his influence, not in the man himself. The warmth of human connection had faded, replaced by empty congratulations and polite gestures. He now saw that those early birthdays had been more meaningful than any extravagant celebration he could ever throw today. He remembered one particular birthday from his teenage years, when his parents had surprised him with a small picnic in the park. Nothing luxurious, nothing fancy, just homemade sandwiches, a few balloons, and the people who loved him most. The joy he felt that day had nothing to do with money. It had everything to do with being acknowledged, celebrated, and loved. That memory brought a bittersweet smile to his face, a reminder of a simpler, happier time. As he lingered on these memories, he noticed how differently he had experienced joy in the past compared to the present. Happiness back then had been shared, effortless, and genuine. It was about relationships, not possessions, about laughter, not luxury, about care, not status. The contrast between then and now felt sharp and painful, yet it also offered him a lesson. The most precious moments in life are not bought, they are lived. The Tycoon sighed and leaned back in his chair, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and longing. Those memories reminded him of what he had lost along the way, and also what he could still regain if he allowed himself to open up again. For the first time in years, he acknowledged the truth, that human connection was more valuable than any fortune, more fulfilling than any title, more lasting than any possession. And as he sat there, lost in the echoes of the past, a tiny spark of hope began to flicker. He did not know it yet, but life had a way of giving second chances, and sometimes, the simplest gestures could bring back a world of happiness. Today, on his birthday, that spark would grow, leading him to an experience that would remind him what truly mattered. The past had prepared him, had reminded him of love, laughter, and joy. And now, the present was about to answer his quiet, unspoken wishes. The morning stretched on quietly, yet for the Tycoon, it felt heavy, almost endless. He moved through his enormous mansion like a ghost, surrounded by luxury but untouched by joy. Even the birds outside the window seemed to sing for someone else, not for him. He tried to focus on work, convincing himself that this was just another day, but deep down, he knew it was not. Today was his birthday, a day that once held excitement, surprises, and laughter. Now, it held only silence, and the silence pressed on him like a weight he could not lift. He walked into the study, the room lined with books he rarely read, photographs he rarely looked at, and awards he rarely admired. Everything in this space reflected his success, but also the cost of it. The Tycoon poured himself a cup of coffee, watching the steam rise and swirl like fleeting memories. He sipped slowly, hoping the bitter warmth would somehow fill the emptiness in his chest, but it did not. It only reminded him of how alone he truly was. The phone on his desk buzzed occasionally, but each time it rang, it brought only routine notifications or impersonal messages. Happy birthday, Mr. Stanton, typed with careful professionalism, or emails filled with congratulations that felt more like obligations than care. No one reached out with warmth, no friend called to laugh with him, no family member sent a message that felt real. The Tycoon realized with a sinking feeling that most of the people in his life were too busy, or too distant, to notice him. He tried to distract himself with meetings, reading reports, reviewing contracts, and making phone calls, but each task felt hollow, devoid of meaning. It was like moving through life on autopilot, performing tasks that mattered to the world but not to the heart. Every time he glanced at the clock, the day seemed to stretch endlessly, dragging with it a sense of loneliness that only grew stronger. Even the servants moved around quietly, performing their duties without acknowledgement of the day. The mansion, usually bustling with staff, felt like a museum today, every polished surface and ornate decoration reflecting the emptiness rather than beauty. He realized he could have all the power, all the influence, all the wealth in the world, yet still feel invisible, forgotten, small. The irony was not lost on him, that in a life designed to command attention, he could feel so unnoticed. By mid-morning, he wandered to the balcony, gazing down at the city below. People walked hurriedly, cars honked, street vendors shouted, and the world carried on without pause, completely unaware of the lonely Tycoon watching from above. The bustling energy around him only deepened the quiet ache inside, making him feel like an outsider in a world that moved too fast to notice him. He realized he had built walls around himself with ambition and pride, and those walls now kept him from the joy that once came naturally. He thought about what it would take to fill the void, and no answer came. Money could not buy it, power could not create it, and fame could not replace it. It was something far simpler and far more human: connection, care, love, laughter. He could remember how it felt to be celebrated, not for what he owned or achieved, but simply for who he was. For a moment, he closed his eyes and let himself imagine someone entering his life. A surprise, a friend, a spark of joy to break the monotony, but he pushed the thought away, telling himself it was impossible, that life didn't work that way. Yet, even as he tried to dismiss it, a small, quiet hope began to form, almost like a whisper in his heart. He didn't know when, or how, or from whom, but something told him that the day might not be as empty as it seemed, that perhaps life had a way of answering wishes in the most unexpected ways. He stood there on the balcony, feeling the cool morning breeze, and for the first time that day, he allowed himself to wonder what the day might hold. Little did he know, that the world outside his doors was preparing something that would shake the emptiness, something simple, genuine, and full of life. Someone was coming to break the silence, to bring laughter where there had been none, and to remind him that even the loneliest hearts could find connection. The Tycoon took a deep breath, unaware that his lonely morning was about to turn into the most unforgettable birthday he had ever had. Outside the mansion, the morning sun sparkled on the quiet street, and in a small, bustling neighborhood not far away, the nanny and her children were preparing for something special. They had been planning this day with excitement that could not be contained. The children giggled as they helped their mother pack a small basket full of homemade treats, colorful balloons, and little handmade cards. Each item was chosen with care, a simple gesture of love that they hoped would bring joy to someone who needed it more than anyone could imagine. The nanny looked at her children, her heart swelling with pride and anticipation. "Remember," she said softly, "it's not about the gifts or the fancy decorations. What matters is that we bring a little happiness into someone's life today." The children nodded eagerly, their faces bright with anticipation. Their innocence and energy created a warmth that seemed to ripple through the air, as if the universe itself recognized the good that was about to happen. They walked together, basket in hand, balloons bouncing lightly against the sides, and laughter spilling into the morning air. As they approached the Tycoon's mansion, the children's excitement grew. They had never met him before, but they had heard stories from their nanny, stories of a man who was kind, generous, and lonely, a man who, despite having everything in the world, had very little joy in his heart on his birthday. The children could not wait to change that, even if only for one day. Inside the mansion, the Tycoon was still caught in his thoughts, moving through the grand halls with a quiet sadness. Every sound outside went unnoticed, every shadow passed without acknowledgement, yet something in the air seemed different. He felt it almost instinctively, a tiny shift, like a flutter in his chest, a whisper that told him that something was coming, something good, something warm, something real, something that could change the heavy weight of loneliness pressing on him. Meanwhile, the nanny and the children stopped at the enormous gates, taking a moment to steady their excitement. The children's eyes widened at the grandeur of the mansion, yet they did not feel intimidated. They clutched their little cards tightly, imagining the smile on the man's face when he would see them. The nanny knelt down, speaking softly, "It's okay, be brave. Remember, we're here to make someone's day brighter." that's all that matters." The children nodded, their little hands gripping hers, and together they pushed the gates open, stepping into a world that felt vast and unfamiliar, yet full of potential. Back inside, the Tycoon's phone buzzed briefly, a reminder of appointments and schedules, but he ignored it, still lost in thought, and then, faintly, he heard laughter, soft and innocent, coming from somewhere outside. It was not the polite or rehearsed laughter of adults in business meetings, but genuine, joyful, free, and bright. Something stirred inside him, something he had not felt in years, curiosity mixed with hope. He paused, listening closely, his heart beating a little faster, wondering what could possibly be happening. The laughter grew nearer, and the Tycoon felt an unfamiliar anticipation. He could not explain why, but a small spark of joy ignited, threading its way through the heavy loneliness that had filled his day. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps the day might not be as empty as he had feared, that maybe, just maybe, someone had remembered, someone cared, someone wanted to bring a little happiness into his life. And at that moment, he did not know who or what it would be, but he felt ready, somehow, to embrace it. Outside, the nanny held the gate open and motioned to the children, "Go on, show him your surprise." The children ran lightly across the mansion grounds, balloons bobbing in the wind, little cards clutched tightly, their hearts full of hope and excitement. Little did anyone know, this small act of kindness would soon ignite a day full of laughter, tears, and unforgettable memories. The first signs of hope had arrived, and with them, the promise that a lonely heart might finally be touched. The mansion was silent, except for the soft hum of the morning, when suddenly, a faint sound of footsteps echoed across the polished marble floors, almost imperceptible at first, but then clearer, laughter, cheerful chatter, and the unmistakable patter of little feet. The Tycoon paused mid-step, his heart skipping a beat. He had been alone all morning, lost in his thoughts, yet now, a strange curiosity stirred within him. Who could it be? Through the massive front doors, the nanny and her children appeared, carrying their small basket of treats and colorful balloons. The children's faces were bright with excitement, their eyes sparkling like tiny stars as they scanned the grand hall. The nanny walked beside them, calm yet gentle, her presence reassuring. She had always known how powerful small acts of kindness could be, and today, she was determined to bring joy where it was needed most. The Tycoon watched from a distance, almost frozen in disbelief. His mansion had hosted countless people over the years, business partners, socialites, strangers, but none of them had entered with this kind of warmth, with this kind of pure-hearted intention. The laughter and energy of the children seemed to ripple through the air, brushing away the heaviness that had settled in his chest. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A flicker of hope, fragile but undeniable. At first, he remained quiet, unsure how to approach them, unsure if he was ready to accept happiness, unsure if he could even let someone into his carefully constructed world. The children, however, were fearless, guided by innocence and the simple desire to make someone smile. They ran toward him, holding their handmade cards and gifts, calling out a cheerful, "Happy birthday." Their voices echoed through the grand hall, breaking the long silence. The Tycoon felt his lips twitch in surprise, and then a small, hesitant smile appeared, a smile that had not been seen in years. The children, sensing the change, laughed even louder, thinking they had done something magical, and in a way, they had, for in that instant, the mansion no longer felt empty, the walls no longer seemed cold and distant. The silence that had weighed on him all morning was replaced with a warmth that wrapped around his heart like a gentle embrace. The nanny stepped closer, her eyes meeting the Tycoon's with kindness and understanding. "We thought you might like a little company today," she said softly, her voice calm yet filled with compassion. "Sometimes birthdays are best celebrated with laughter, love, and a few surprises." The Tycoon nodded slowly, unable to find the words to express the swirl of emotions inside him, gratitude, relief, and joy mixed together, creating a feeling so new, so intense, that he almost forgot how to breathe. The children handed him their gifts, each one small but meaningful, handmade with care and thought. One card had colorful scribbles and the words, "We hope your day is happy." Another had tiny drawings of balloons and cake, and even a small flower tucked inside. The Tycoon's hands shook slightly as he accepted them, overwhelmed by the simplicity and honesty of their gesture. It was a gift he could not have bought, a gift money could never provide. For the first time that day, the Tycoon laughed, a soft, genuine sound that filled the grand hall and echoed through the mansion. The children giggled in response, thinking it was the best reaction in the world. The nanny smiled, knowing that her small act of kindness had begun to work its magic. Slowly, the Tycoon stepped forward, letting the children's energy and warmth enter his carefully controlled life, allowing himself to feel, to connect, to hope. And in that moment, the mansion transformed, not through wealth or grandeur, but through laughter, love, and unexpected human connection. The Tycoon, who had spent the morning feeling invisible, forgotten, and sad, now felt seen, valued, and alive. For the first time in years, he realized that happiness could come from the simplest gestures, from hearts that cared enough to reach out, and from those who reminded him that life was not measured by wealth alone, but by moments of connection, warmth, and love. The moment the children entered the mansion, their eyes sparkled with excitement, and the Tycoon felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. The nanny quietly guided them to the grand dining room, where the table, though large and elegant, was empty, waiting to be filled with more than just wealth. The children carefully placed their handmade cards, little gifts, and even a few balloons onto the table, giggling as they arranged everything just right. Their energy and innocence transformed the room, turning it from cold and formal into a space alive with joy. The Tycoon watched from the doorway, his heart pounding with anticipation and disbelief. He had never imagined that something so simple could feel so extraordinary. The scent of the homemade treats filled the air, mingling with the faint perfume of the flowers the children had picked along the way. Every small detail, the crooked letters on the cards, the mismatched colors of the balloons, the laughter that echoed off the walls, made the room feel warmer than any palace could. "Happy birthday!" the children shouted together, their voices bursting with unfiltered joy. The Tycoon felt a lump in his throat, his chest tightening, as he realized that this was the first time in years that someone had celebrated him simply for who he was, not for his status or wealth, not for the titles he carried, the money he had earned, or the influence he wielded, but for the person behind the name, the human being who had long been forgotten amidst grandeur and success. He slowly approached the table, kneeling slightly to meet the children at eye level. His fingers brushed over the handmade cards, feeling the texture of the paper and the effort put into every scribble and drawing. One of the children handed him a small cake, uneven and slightly messy, but perfect in its innocence. The Tycoon's eyes glistened as he took a deep breath, savoring the sight, the smell, and the love behind this simple creation. It was a moment no amount of money could ever buy. The nanny smiled softly from the corner of the room, watching as the Tycoon's walls began to crumble, piece by piece. She knew that happiness often came in small, unexpected ways, and today, the simplest gestures had begun to work their magic. The children giggled as they encouraged him to blow out the tiny candles on the cake, their laughter contagious, spreading through the room like sunlight on a cloudy day. For the Tycoon, every flicker of those flames felt like a spark reigniting something deep within him, something he thought had been lost forever. He closed his eyes for a moment and made a silent wish, not for wealth, not for power, but for more moments like this, moments filled with genuine connection, joy, and laughter. The children clapped excitedly as he opened his eyes, their small hands high-fiving each other, while the nanny offered a reassuring smile. The mansion, which had felt empty and cold just hours ago, now thrummed with life, warmth, and love, transforming into a home, not a fortress. The Tycoon laughed for the first time that day, a sound that was both surprised and delighted, pure and genuine. The children's joy fed his own, and he realized how long it had been since he had experienced this kind of happiness, not the happiness of achievement or success, but the happiness of being seen, appreciated, and loved. Every giggle, every smile, every small act of care made him feel alive in a way money never could. As the celebration continued, the Tycoon noticed how effortless it all felt, how real, how alive. He felt grateful, not just for the surprise, but for the reminder that life's simplest pleasures often carried the deepest meaning. The handmade cards, the small cake, the laughter, and even the chaos of children running through the grand halls reminded him that happiness was not about grandeur, but about connection, love, and presence. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter, joy, and unexpected companionship, the Tycoon realized that birthdays were never really about gifts, fame, or attention. They were about the hearts that reached out, the people who remembered, and the love that could transform even the loneliest days into memories to cherish forever. That day, with the nanny and her children, he had finally found what he had been missing all along. And his world, once silent and lonely, was now alive with celebration, warmth, and hope. As the laughter of the children echoed through the grand halls, the Tycoon felt something shift inside him, a warmth spreading slowly from his chest to the tips of his fingers. The joy that had seemed so distant, so unreachable just hours ago, now wrapped around him like a soft blanket. He watched the children play, their energy contagious, and he realized that he had forgotten what it felt like to be truly present, to live in a moment without thinking about wealth, status, or obligations. For years, he had measured life in numbers, accounts, investments, profits, and deals, but today, he understood that life's most precious moments could not be calculated. They came in laughter, in small gestures, in the kindness of others, and in the love that was freely given, without expectation or reward. The Tycoon felt his heart open, letting go of the cold, empty weight that had been pressing down on him for so long. One of the children ran to him, handing him a card covered in crayon drawings. The words were simple, "You are loved," scribbled in uneven handwriting, but the message struck him deeply. He knelt down and hugged the child gently, feeling the warmth of their tiny body against his, and for the first time in years, he felt a connection that had nothing to do with money, influence, or power. The innocence and honesty of the moment washed over him, leaving tears threatening to spill. The nanny watched quietly, giving him space but offering a reassuring smile. She had seen him smile before, but this was different. This was a smile that came from the heart, unguarded and free. It was the smile of someone who realized that happiness could exist even in the most unexpected places, and that the smallest acts of kindness could transform a life completely. The Tycoon moved around the mansion with new eyes, noticing details he had ignored for years, the paintings on the walls, the sunlight spilling onto the floors, the way the children's laughter bounced off the high ceilings. The mansion no longer felt like a cold, empty palace. It felt alive, warm, and welcoming, infused with energy that no gold or luxury could ever provide. Every corner held a memory being created in real time, and every smile reminded him that he was no longer alone. He found himself joining in their games, laughing freely, chasing the children as they ran from room to room, lifting balloons, and pretending to be a giant monster who was easily defeated by giggles. The Tycoon felt a lightness in his chest he had not experienced in decades, a joy so pure that it seemed to erase all traces of the loneliness that had haunted him. The simple act of playing, of giving himself fully to the moment, reminded him of who he once was, and who he could be again. As the day wore on, he realized that the true gift of this birthday was not the cake, the balloons, or even the handmade cards. It was the reminder that life's greatest treasures were not material, but emotional. The Tycoon understood that love, laughter, and human connection were worth more than any fortune he had accumulated, and that happiness could appear unexpectedly, carried by the smallest gestures and the kindest hearts. By the end of the celebration, the mansion was filled with warmth, laughter, and the echoes of joy that would linger long after the children left. The Tycoon sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on the transformation within him. The sadness that had weighed on him like stone had been replaced with gratitude, hope, and a renewed understanding of what truly mattered. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that life could still surprise him, that human connection could bring profound happiness, and that even a lonely heart could be healed. The nanny and her children had not just celebrated his birthday, they had awakened something deep inside him, something he thought he had lost forever, and he knew that this day would remain etched in his memory as a turning point. A day when joy returned to a heart that had almost forgotten how to feel. As the evening sun cast a warm glow through the tall windows of the mansion, the Tycoon sat quietly in his favorite armchair, the laughter of the children now a fading echo in the halls. He held one of the handmade cards close to his chest, feeling the rough texture of the paper beneath his fingers. Every scribble, every crayon stroke reminded him of something he had almost forgotten, the joy of being seen, the power of small gestures, and the warmth of genuine care. The mansion, once a place of emptiness and silence, now felt alive, infused with memories of the day's celebration. The Tycoon's eyes wandered across the rooms, recalling every smile, every laugh, every little moment that had transformed his lonely birthday into something unforgettable. He realized that he had spent years chasing wealth, status, and recognition, believing they would fill the void inside him. But none of it had ever come close to this, to the simple happiness that came from connection and love. He thought about how easily he had taken life for granted, how busy he had been climbing the ladder of success, always reaching for more, yet never stopping to appreciate the moments that truly mattered. Today had been a reminder, a gentle but powerful nudge from life, showing him that happiness could not be bought, that relationships, laughter, and acts of kindness were far more valuable than any fortune. The tycoon reflected on the nanny and her children, their courage and innocence, and how they had shown him the magic of caring without expectation. Their small act of love had opened his heart, teaching him a lesson he had long ignored, that true happiness comes from giving and receiving, from noticing others, and from letting people into your life. No amount of wealth could replace what they had brought him today, and he vowed silently that he would never forget it. He realized that his life needed to change, not just in small ways, but in the choices he made every day. He wanted to be more present, more thoughtful, and more compassionate, to invest not only in business ventures but in relationships, in people, in the moments that matter. The tycoon understood that being successful did not have to mean being lonely, that connection and empathy could exist alongside ambition and power. The day's events replayed in his mind like a vivid movie, the children's laughter, their tiny hands offering gifts, the sparkling eyes of someone who simply cared. The tycoon smiled, feeling gratitude swell inside him. He thought about the people he had neglected over the years, friends, family, even colleagues who had once shown genuine care, and he knew he would reach out, rebuild bridges, and let love guide his future actions, not just money or status. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace, a quiet contentment that had nothing to do with possessions or fame. He realized that life's true treasures are invisible to the eye, felt in the heart, and remembered in the soul. Today had taught him that happiness is not found in isolation but in connection, and that the smallest acts of kindness can leave the deepest marks. The nanny and her children had reminded him that even the loneliest hearts can find joy if they allow themselves to be open. As the mansion grew quiet with the approaching evening, the tycoon rose and walked to the window, looking out over the city lights twinkling in the distance. He felt lighter, freer, and more alive than he had in years. The sadness of the morning had been replaced by hope, the loneliness replaced by a newfound understanding of life's true value. He knew that he would carry today's lessons with him forever, letting them guide his decisions, his actions, and the way he treated those around him. And in that reflective, peaceful moment, the tycoon smiled genuinely, a smile that was no longer forced or fleeting, but real, warm, and full of life. He had been reminded that even in the midst of loneliness, connection could be found, joy could be created, and love could arrive when least expected. His birthday, once destined to be a quiet, empty day, had become a turning point, a new beginning, a promise of change, happiness, and the kind of fulfillment that no wealth could ever buy.